Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, or whatever it happens to be. I promised I would read today the opening to A Rising Moon, which is the sequel to A Fading Sun. Now, I'm not one who prefers to have in a series just a book just stop. I prefer that the succeeding books, and this will be the only succeeding book for this series, stands on its own. So to do that, this has an entirely different protagonist than A Fading Sun. The protagonist of this one is Orla, who is the daughter of the protagonist, Voada, of A Fading Sun. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it. Again, it's still available, so if you have not read it, why not? And if you have not read it, you can still pick it up somewhere. So here we go. Year 22 of Pashtuk's reign. Orla, hurry, girl, you must come with us. Orla glanced up from cleaning the miserable shriveled potatoes she'd scavenged from the little plot in back of the hut. She saw a rain-soaked and dripping Sorcha at the crude wooden door. Behind Sorcha, who was not much older than Orla herself, was a Mandoan woman with hair turning gray at the temples, Azru, the first wife of the Mandoan officer Bakir, to whom Orla was second wife. Outside, the clouds were weeping, and the encampment's grounds were a morass of sloppy mud. But despite the weather, Orla could see other camp wives running through the lanes between the warren of huts. Orla's eyebrows lifted at the sight. Sorcha? Azru? What's happening? Sorcha could only shake her head, beads of water flying from the strands under her hood. Her brown hair looked nearly black with the moisture. She rubbed water away from eyes the color of ripe sweet nuts. Azru spoke instead, her voice tinted with the nasal accent of the Mandoa as she spoke in halting Kateni. She glanced out toward the camp, then her gaze moved quickly back to Orla. No time to explain. Just grab whatever you can carry, anything you absolutely don't want to leave behind, and come with me. Here, let us help you. Sorcha ducked under the low lintel and entered the room with Azru following. Orla could see that Sorcha was carrying a linen sack stuffed with clothing and household odds and ends, though Azru was empty-handed except for an empty sack that she thrust in Orla's direction. Sorcha went to the battered chest at the foot of the bed. Azru busied herself elsewhere, grabbing Orla's best teapot and skillet and wrapping them with a tinderbox in a tablecloth. Orla watched, wide-eyed and open-mouthed, not moving. "Wake up, girl," Sorcha said. "Tell me what clothing you want to keep." Sorcha was tossing the chest contents onto the bed. "Do you have any jewelry or keepsakes you must have?" Orla touched the silver oak leaf that hung around her neck on a leather string. A gift from her mother, and the only thing she'd managed to keep when she'd been forcibly taken from Pencraig, her old home. "Only what I carry with me," she said, going to the bed and starting to shove her least worn clothing into the sack. "Sorcha, Azru, what's happened?" she asked again. "No time," Azru told Orla. "Just trust me." "Is it Bakir?" Orla asked. Is he dead?" Orla couldn't bring herself to say the word, not knowing if she might laugh in joy at the thought, and not certain how Azru might respond. She glanced at Azru, tying up good kitchenware in the tablecloth. Bakir had treated her like a despised slave, to be used in any way he desired. Azru, however, had treated Orla gently, and if she couldn't stop Bakir's abuse, she had sheltered Orla from the worst of it, and for that Orla was grateful. Azru's treatment was unlike many of the other Mandoan wives, who thought of the Kateni wives as simply chattel. "The other wives," Orla managed to husk out. "They're not going to let us leave. They're always watching, and they'll stop us if we try to run." Azru gave a short bark of a laugh at that. "Most of the camp wives have gone to the southern gate." She took a long, airy breath. "Orla, our Bakir's dead, and so is Sorcha's Alim. That's why you must go, but not all. Please, Orla, no talk. You need to go. You especially need to go." With Bakir dead and what your mother's done, you must go. Now, before they realize. Bakir dead. She'd often wished that, even imagined that glorious moment, since he'd beaten her mother nearly to death, sent her brother to the copper mines, and taken Orla as his second wife. She had no love for the man, only a smoldering and futile hatred. She had attempted to escape from him a dozen times. Azru had always pretended not to see her leave, but someone had always seen her and raised a cry. She'd been dragged back each time and punished heartily. That one! She's the Mad Dree's daughter, Voada's child. You can't let her escape. When we get the chance, we'll kill her for everything her mother's done. We'll make her pay. Strangely, the news that Bakir had gone didn't give her the joy she'd always thought it would. She only felt empty and sad for Azru and her children, who were blameless. Azru had gone to the open doorway as Sorcha and Orla continued to stuff clothing into the sack. "That's enough," Orla heard Azru say. "Tie it off, give it to Orla." The woman tossed Orla her rough woolen cloak hanging on its hook by the doorway. "Here, follow me." Azru was already outside, and Sorcha moved into the downpour again after her. Pulling up her hood and putting the sack under her arm, Orla followed the two. The encampment, built on the southern side of the River Meon, halfway between Muris and the Storm Sea, was alive with movement, as if someone had rammed a stick into a beehive and stirred it. There were people rushing toward the southern gate, mostly women and children, since nearly all the men, but for the severely injured, had gone south with Commander Savas to confront the Kateni army over a week ago. For a moment, no one seemed to pay much attention to the trio as Azru led them against the flow to the northern end of the encampment in the meadow leading down to the river's shore. "My mother?" Orla asked as they half ran between the last few huts and onto the open ground along the river. "Has something happened to her?" "They're saying there was a great battle near Siren," Sorcha said breathlessly. "A messenger came not a turn of the glass ago with the news that the Kateni had fled the field in defeat." "My mother?" Orla asked again. "Kiandri Voada?" Sorcha only shook her head. "She was mortally wounded, according to the messenger, and Kianard Mal Iosa was taken dead from the field," she answered between breaths. "But Commander Savas's army suffered great numbers of casualties themselves, too many for them to pursue what's left of the Kateni forces. The remnants of the army are returning here, and everyone's gone to hear if her husband is one of the dead or wounded. Far too many of them will be." Azru had stopped as Sorcha was talking. She took a long breath and stared at Orla. "The women and the men are going to blame you for the deaths and injuries your mother's inflicted," Orla, she finished. "And you won't have Bakir's presence to hold them back, even if he would at this point. I know how disgracefully he's treated you, and I don't blame you for hating him. But whether you know it or not, he did protect you when other soldiers or their wives would have killed you for the death and destruction your mother brought. You have to leave here, Orla. Sorcha does too, because with Alim..." She shrugged, leaving the rest unsaid. Orla knew what she meant. The Kateni wives were the underclass, looked down upon and reviled. A widowed Kateni wouldn't live long. Orla turned to Sorcha. "Your children? Erdem, Esra?" A look of deep pain crossed Sorcha's face. "Azru has promised to look after them for me." "The boys will be better off here than with us," she said. "They're half Mandoan, and Commander Savas will make sure they're looked after. With your mother dying and Kianard Mol already dead, I have to believe their prospects are better here with me than with me in the north." "Sorcha." Orla touched the woman's arm in sympathy. Sorcha sniffed and wiped at her eyes with the rain-soaked sleeve of her cloak. "You should go back and get them. I'll wait here, or I'll go with you." "No!" Sorcha's denial was both a wail of grief and a cry of desperation, and she looked at Azru helplessly. "Azru will take them in. It's done. Just be glad you miscarried the child Bakir put in you, so you'll never have to make a decision like that." Enough, Azru interjected. Hurry now, come on. I know where there's a boat tied up on this side of the river. We don't have much time before they notice you're gone, and I have to get back for my children and Sorcha's. Azru moved toward the river at a quick walk. Sorcha took Orla's hand again, pulling her along. Orla followed, glancing back once at the encampment where she'd lived for the last several moons. She could see people gathering in the central court and the gleam of armor on the soldiers marching in. From the camp, she heard the long wail of a woman, a cry of grief and pain. The sound put speed into their feet, and the trio raced to the rush-cloaked bank of the river. There, Azru pointed to a small curragh sitting upside down on the bank as rain dripped from her forefinger. She handed Orla the wrapped kitchenware she carried. I have to go now. Good luck to you both. She embraced Orla quickly, and then Sorcha, then turned without another word, running back toward the camp. Sorcha and Orla went to the small boat, turned it over, and put their bundles in. Sorcha held the curragh steady for Orla as she climbed in and took the single oar. She could feel the pull of the river's current, wanting to take the boat. Then Sorcha stepped in, holding the rope that had been tied around a rock at the river's edge, and the tide-driven water took them quickly out as Orla paddled desperately. The Mian's swift current carried them westward toward its mouth at the storm sea, even as she and Sorcha steered the little craft slowly north toward the opposite bank, away from the life Orla had known ever since Bakir had stolen her from her mother and her home. They rode toward Alban Bagad, toward the clans of the north, toward an uncertain and frightening future. And that's the opening to A Rising Moon. Hope you enjoyed it. As I said, pick up the book, pick up both books if you haven't already read them, and I hope you enjoy them. Let me know.